What's up? Welcome to the booth. My name's Riley, joined by Paul Cheon, of course, and it's time to head down to the feature match area for our first semi-final here at the Magic the Gathering World Championship. Paul, we've already discussed the players we're going to be seeing. William Jensen and Kelvin Chew, of course. Teamer Energy, blue-black control. It's a matchup. It's the matchup of the tournament.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of this matchup, and it's actually really gone both ways. We've seen plenty of teamer decks come out victorious, but also we've seen plenty of blue-black decks win as well. So I think, talking to Huey, actually he did some testing last night, and he was like, you know what, I think it's a really close matchup. We'll see what happens.
Plenty of push and pull to this matchup. Huey Jensen's going to kick us off here with his first play now. Land's not going to be an issue for him as we see his mana develop quite nicely, and Chew's looking like he's got a hand that, well, I don't know. It's going to see him through at least the first couple of turns.
Yeah, so it looks like William Jensen mulliganed, but this is kind of your primary game plan, game one. It is resolve a turn to a Longtusk Cub, hope it lives, and then just kind of let that snowball the game. Outside of that, as the game drags on and on, the blue-black control does just kind of take over. The blue-black control deck doesn't really run out of gas because every spell is actually pretty relevant in the matchup. Whereas the Teamer Energy deck, once you get to turns 10, 11, 12, at some point you're going to start drawing those Magma Sprays and those Abrades, which don't do a whole lot in the matchup. I
mean, the Teamer deck does have a great late game, relatively speaking. Against the rest of the field, it dominates the battlefield. It goes very, very hard in the paint. But the fact is, the blue-black control deck, it goes much, much bigger and ultimately can trump the energy deck with just sheer power level.
Yeah, so this is big. Kelvin Chew does not have Fatal Push, and in hand, he has Essence Extraction. However, William Jensen just played a Tune with Ether, which is going to give him 3 energy. That's going to make a 3/3 Longtusk Cub, and then once the Longtusk Cub connects, he can potentially turn it into a 4/4, meaning it will be out of the reach of that Essence Extraction.
Now, I reckon Chew's been really clever with this tournament. He's got access to 4 copies of Essence Extraction in his 75, which is obviously absolutely at its best against Mono Red, but right now, a little bit of a liability, Paul, against Longtusk Cub, which, as you say, can get very large very quickly.
Yeah, this player draw being very, very important here. If Kelvin Chew was on the play, he would have actually been able to deal with that Longtusk Cub with both Essence Scattered and the Essence Extraction in hand.
Well, as it is, it's going to get frisky and come in for 3 by the look of things.
Huey opting to be aggressive here, and then now he has to make a decision. Kelvin Chew is representing both Sensor and Essence Scatter. He has a Servant of the Conduit and a Longtusk Cub. What is he going to go for?
He's going to go for the Servant, and we're going to snap off this Essence Scatter very, very quickly. But the problem, of course, remains this Longtusk Cub. This is what Teamer Energy needs to do early to get up against blue-black control. Early pressure, backed up with the disruption this deck is known for, and things are looking good for Huey so far as he gets in for another.
Is Kelvin Chew going to go for the Essence Extraction? Huey does have a Harness Lightning here, which he can use to actually counter this Essence Extraction. He can cast Harness Lightning targeting the Longtusk Cub, use 0 energy, and just make 3 energy and just pump it up.
Next level plays. Wow. You wouldn't expect you target your own creature with
I'd
a
expect
removal
it from
spell.
Huey.
But this is one way to get out of it, indeed, as we see the Longtusk Cub grow out of range here thanks to that Harness Lightning and Energy Reserve staying nice and full here, Paul.
Yeah, this is huge. Kelvin Chew absolutely needs to find either a Fatal Push or a Vraska's Contempt to deal with this Longtusk Cub.
He needs some of that unconditional removal, and he needs it right now. We can have a look at his hand here, and he does indeed have the Contempt. That's a clutch draw here for the Singaporean, because not only is it going to clear out that Cub, it's also going to buffer his life total just a little bit, which is going to be key.
And this is the thing about it being game 1. The fact that this is game 1 means Kelvin Chew doesn't really have to worry about counter magic that William Jensen might have in his hand. So he can actually just feel free to pass and, cast the Vraska's Contempt when William Jensen opts to attack. Now, if it were sideboarding games, he would have likely tapped out and done it on his own turn.
Because, of course, Jensen's going to be bringing in things like Negate, things like Supreme Will. We've also seen Spell Pierce, not in Jensen's list, but these are ways that the energy deck sort of pivots to contest the control decks afterwards. Now, there's a second Longtusk Cub. How worried about this is Kelvin Chew?
Not a whole lot at this point. He's about to resolve a Glimmer of Genius. He has a lot of answers to this Longtusk Cub. He can either draw Torrential Gearhulk, more Vraska's Contempts, or even just run out a Scarab God if he so chooses, which I think he actually has one in hand already.
Looks like he's got one in hand. We're going to go 1 on top, 1 below decks here for Kelvin Chew off of this Scry 2. You're going to draw 2, gain 2 energy as well. And it is back to him. Now, the Master, he's known in the Singaporean community. This guy is not here to make friends. And we can see now that magic number, Paul Cheon, 6 mana for him.
Yeah, Kelvin Chew, part of the MTG Mint card testing team, and when I talk to his teammates, they all go, yeah, he's really impressive. And anytime you play against him, he's not going to give you anything.
Servant of the Conduit comes down for Jensen. Of course, Chew with the opportunity to respond. You can see him there.
That hand is loaded. It's going to be super difficult for William Jensen to get out of this. And not only that, if you look at William Jensen's list, he plays 0 copies of Chandra, Torch of Defiance, which is typically a card that gives you a huge edge against the control matchups if you can resolve it. He has 0 copies of that in the main deck, so he doesn't have a lot of ways to give him continual, he doesn't have a continuous source of card advantage like a lot of other Teamer Energy decks.
So, Chew taking a pasting here from this Longtusk Cub and tries to resolve a Torrential Gearhulk. Essence Scatter is going to take care of that one here.
Oh, wow.
And we see here Jensen is very firmly protecting
but he found a fatal push.
That's huge here because that means the pressure is all of a sudden off. Jensen's going to have to find something here.
So if you notice, Kelvin Chew has access to that Scarab God, which he could have opted to play that turn, but he does have 2 counterspells in hand. He could be concerned about a card like Confiscation Crew and wait till he has counter magic to do it. But you know what? Huey has no cards in hand. He knows William Jensen only has access to that 1 Confiscation Coup in the deck, so now he's got the Essence Scatter in his hand, so he can protect against any of the creatures that Huey might have. Also, Huey, again, no Chandra.
No.
So the only threat that he can play this turn would be a creature.
The one of confiscation.
Unless it's the one of confiscation.
Unless it's the one of confiscation. We've got to talk about this card. It's been brought into the main deck of the Teamer Energy lists, brought to bear by the Peach Garden Oath this weekend, as it's a huge trump in the mirror pool.
Okay, and that is a Bristling Hydra, which Kelvin does have the answer for.
He's going to eat it.
Okay, and here we go. We've
and
untapped.
This is it. This is it,
Untap with
Paul.
Scarab God.
Untapping with Scarab God is going to absolutely send your win percentage into the stratosphere. In comes the 5-5, going to slap Jensen around some here. A big hit for him to deal with, and
this is going to be the game.
He's treading water here.
Yeah, and if you notice, Kelvin Chew opted, a common play that people use is during my upkeep with Scarab God on the stack, I will return a creature. I will eternalize a creature so I can get an additional Scribe. But he wanted to have just a lot of mana available because he has a Torrential Gearhulk in his graveyard. He can instantly return a Torrential Gearhulk to utilize one of his counterspells in his graveyard. And
he's happy enough to do it now. Jensen down to 13 after this Scarab God scries. We see Kelvin Chew smooth out those draw skis. He's snoot firmly ahead. Here is another fatal push, clears the way for an all-out attack. Jensen packs them up. We're going to game 2. Kelvin Chew, as we sort of thought here, blue-black control favored pre-board, I should say, against Teamer Energy. Paul Cheon, of course, will be back with more between these two here, Jensen versus Chew. Got to go to a break, but stick around on the other side of this. More magic coming away from Boston.
Head down to your local store and buy a box of Ixalan to receive a dino-sized booster. Each booster is filled with 4 rares or mythic rares, 4 premium foils, and an alternate art premium foil rare. Limit 1 per customer. Visit Ixalan.com to find a store. Play Standard each week to win special Standard Showdown prize boosters. Ixalan Standard Showdown events are hosted by local stores each Saturday and Sunday. Find a location to play at magic.wizards.com/Standard Showdown.
And welcome back to live coverage of the Magic the Gathering World Championship. You're in the booth with Riley Knight alongside me, Paul Cheon. A great pleasure to have your company. Welcome to you wherever you are around the world. On your screen, very soon, you're going to see the second game between William Jensen on the left and Kelvin Chew on the right. Now, Paul, an interesting sort of wrinkle in our finals matches for the World Championship, of course, is that they are best of 5. And we'll come back and explain what that means in just a minute, because right now, it's time to talk about the marquee mythic that Blue-Black Control uses to leverage its position.
Yeah, the Scarab God has kind of been all over the place. Not only is it the finisher of Blue-Black Control decks, this card is powerful enough where the Teamer Energy deck has also splashed this card, mostly because it's an incredibly resilient threat. It is probably the best finisher in Standard because it's just so hard to get rid of. And with, all the various, value energy creatures that both the Blue-Black deck and the Teamer Black decks can play, you can just get a ton of value whenever you're just returning creatures.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It really snowballs out of control as we see these players off to the races for game number 2. Now, we haven't had any opportunity to sideboard yet. This is the interesting wrinkle that comes out of these finals matches here at the World Championship. As they are best of 5, we don't hit the sideboards until game number 3. Now, Paul, what does that mean for this matchup?
Well, so typically, I think this is a very close matchup in the best 2 out of 3 because the Blue-Black Control deck, I think, is a pretty heavy favorite game 1, maybe 70-30, somewhere around there. But after sideboard, I think Teamer might have the slight edge because they kind of play this aggro-controlled game. But if the first 2 games are played with, if the first 2 games are played without sideboard, I think that gives the bigger edge to Blue-Black Control because, as we saw, as long as Kelvin Chew has a couple of early ways to interact with either Longtusk Cub or one of the 3-mana creatures, Kelvin's late game is far stronger, far more potent than the Teamer Energy deck.
And you can see that Chew does indeed have plenty of ways to interact, but this is a big play from Chew here. Search for Azcanta, a card that has been described by some pros as broken.
Right. Search for Azcanta, really powerful. We got to see do a lot of powerful things. But if William Jensen has Bristling Hydra, there's a Bristling Hydra.
That's exactly what he wants, man.
That is the threat that he needed to play. So Kelvin Chew just kind of giving away his hand a little bit there by playing out that Search for Azcanta. And this Bristling Hydra is going to be pretty difficult to deal with.
I mean, we saw the fact that Jensen didn't open with the Longtusk Cub. That's how the Teamer Energy deck gets off on the front foot. But Bristling Hydra, if you can sneak it through the counter magic, it's an incredibly resilient threat. It is going to chuck some huge punches around. And Kelvin Chew has got his work cut out for him. And here is the second part of this 1-2 punch.
And let's take a look at Kelvin's set. Does he have any removal whatsoever? Okay, he's got a Supreme Will, which he is considering here, and it looks like he's opting to go for that. He also had the option to just cast an Ether Meltdown, but it looks like he just wanted to counter it instead.
So instead now he's going to take 4 off of the Bristling Hydra, so Jensen in the driver's seat when it comes to the damage race, but we know that Kelvin Chew is going to have the tools that he needs to overcome this onslaught, although Bristling Hydra,
missed the
once
land
it's
drop
on the battlefield, oh dear.
He missed the land drop, and that's
me.
With the 4 energy on the battlefield, Kelvin Chew now needs to use 2 removal spells to try to get that Bristling Hydra off the board, and also prevent Huey from actually casting cards that allow him to produce energy.
And running Glory Bringers here. We've got back-to-back Glory Bringers, one of which is going to eat this Ether Meltdown, so that's going to give Chew a little bit of energy here, but the Hydra comes across uncontested once again, Paul.
Yeah, there are a few decent ways to deal with Bristling Hydra, but those are mostly the sideboard cards. Vizier of Many Faces, for example, is a way to copy a hexproof creature, and also Bantu's Last Reckoning, which is a card in Kelvin Chew's sideboard. Oh, but there we go.
Scarab God's a nice way to stem the bleeding here, although it does have trouble going toe-to-toe with the Hydra. Of course, it comes back from the graveyard. The Hydra does not, which is very, very important here.
Oh, wow. William Jensen drew the perfect card. He drew a Magma Spray. Now he can use the Glory Bringer, exert it, deal 4 damage to the Scarab God, then cast the Magma Spray to exile the Scarab God. Now, if you exile the Scarab God, doesn't come back.
It does come back. That curtain call is going to go unanswered here, so he's going to attack with a 0-4 Dragon.
We were talking about how Magma Spray is just more or less a dead card in this matchup, but it's actually fantastic here.
Wow, exactly what he wanted to draw. Maybe a Confiscation Coup also sort of very good in this situation.
Okay, Confiscation Coup would have been a little bit better.
But, I mean, but when you're turning a 2-mana, a piddly little burn spell against Blue-Black Control into one of the best cards in your deck, Jensen's got to be very happy with this position.
Yeah, absolutely. And William Jensen still has access to those 2 Harness Lightnings to deal with maybe some flashed Torrential Gearhulks.
So Jensen, he's got a sniff. He can smell it on the wind, Paul Cheon.
Right. I think, one thing that he might be considering here is just casting a Harness Lightning on his Bristling Hydra just to produce energy to try to put Kelvin Chew on a 2-turn clock. I think that's the only thing that's going through his mind because I think he's almost certainly going to exert the Glory Bringer and use the Magma Spray to get rid of the Scarab God.
I mean, aggression's the name of the game, right? He wants to get in here as fast as possible, and we see, look at this exact play that you lined up here, Paul.
Right, so now he can get in for 4, but he can also opt to remove counters, to turn the Bristling Hydra into a 5/4, and then still cast Harness Lightning on his Bristling Hydra to give himself access to 4 energy. He's thinking long about this because
this cuts a turn off.
Yeah, this does cut a turn off. But Torrential Gearhulk is a real card that Kelvin Chew can have.
No, okay. Jensen content just to get Chew down to 8 here.
And it looks like Kelvin Chew does in fact have a Torrential Gearhulk, but he needs to find a land.
Okay, he drew one off the top, and that's the power of search for Azcanta. We saw him think about it for a little bit there. The search is giving you a kind of upgraded twist on Scry, as it does let you bin those cards from the top of your library you don't need here. Now, Jensen's got to be very suspicious of this, of course. 6 mana on the battlefield.
Torrential Gearhulk's been around his standard long enough that I think William might be sniffing something out. I mean, the reason why he didn't go for that Harness Lightning play is because of the fact that he was thinking about the card Torrential Gearhulk.
And this means that Jensen is very, very aware of what he's up against here. You see the 2 of them there. Headsets on as this is being broadcast live throughout the venue here. We've got a crowd assembled. You can see them over there enjoying every minute of this action from Boston, Massachusetts. Certainly great to have them along. Great to have you along as well around the world, wherever you are. Thanks for choosing to join us. Hopefully spending the entire weekend here with us in the Cradle of Liberty. What a pleasure it's been, Paul, to see the best in the biz go toe-to-toe here.
Here we go.
Speaking of the best in the biz, Torrential Gearhulk comes down. And it's going to be Supreme Will, the impulse mode on this card activated here for Chew.
This is the nice flexibility that you have with a card like Supreme Will. You can use it to counter something early, but also in the late game, you can use it to cast Torrential Gearhulk and kind of sculpt your hand.
Yeah, flash that back, snag the card you need. Does it all. Supreme Will, a very worthy addition to the blue-black control lists here.
So now William Jensen has a couple. Ooh, that's a Vraska's contender. But William Jensen now has the option. Does he want to use the Harness Lightning to just get the Torrential Gearhulk off the board? Or does he just want to give himself enough energy so that the Bristling Hydra is just bigger than the Torrential Gearhulk? In order for him to do that, he would have to make the Bristling Hydra into a 7/6. And it's currently a 4/3, so that would require 9 energy. I think it might be better for him to just opt to get the Gearhulk off the board.
Well, he's going to do exactly that, Paul. As we see, a Harness Lightning slung the way of the 5/6, and away it goes. This means the pressure continues from William Jensen here.
And this is still a 2-turn clock. Now, one thing that I might consider here, in order to play around maybe a Vraska's Contempt with Disallow backup, is cast a Harness Lightning on one of my creatures pre-combat, or just on my turn, so that I can make sure I have the hexproof mode available. Because now, if Kelvin Chew had a negate or a land disallow, he would have been able to counter this back.
It could have spelled trouble, but
and
Kelvin Chew's looking at an Essence Scatter here, which is not going to get it done.
Yeah.
So that Vraska's Contempt targeting the, and look at the death stare here from William Jensen. I tell you what, he's not mucking around.
And also, given that
here.
William Jensen was down to 1 energy, he actually just could not use the Harness Lightning to deal with the Scarab God or Torrential Gearhulk anyway.
And that's enough for Kelvin Chew to pack it up here. He recognizes that Hydra is going to get in for the final points here. So Huey Jensen, a smattering of applause here from the assembled crowd. A bit of a fan favorite, of course, a local boy as well. He's from the Massachusetts area, of course. I know his family have come down to cheer him on from the sidelines, of course. Reed Duke, Owen Turtenwald, the rest of the Peach Garden Oath will be rooting heavily for. There they are. Look at that. Mum and Dad up on the screen. Beautiful to see. Everyone's out for the hometown hero here. But, of course, it's not over till the fat lady sings. And we have Kelvin Chew here, still with 3 post games to contest this American superstar. Now we hit the sideboards. Paul, walk us through what's going to change.
All right. Well, Kelvin Chew, we've actually seen this matchup before. Kelvin Chew was actually the first player to give William Jensen his first loss. He was 12-0, then he took a loss, and you know, he won in a fairly convincing fashion.
Well, so let's look at, sorry to cut you off there. Well, let's look at what William Jensen will be bringing to bear in the sideboard. You can see it on your screen. He's really not mucking around when it comes to counterspells.
Wow, yeah, he is ready for the control matchup. We have Chandra, a way to get a lot of advantage with, you know, just another card advantage engine. It's a Planeswalker. He's got 4 copies of Negate to try to fight through the counter magic. And then he tries to turn it into his own Gearhulk control deck. He's got 2 copies of Torrential Gearhulk, along with Supreme Will and Glimmer of Genius. And he might even consider bringing in that Confiscation coup for the Scarab God. Not quite certain if he'd do that. And I've actually seen Owen Turtlenwald bring in Appetite for the Unnatural against these decks because it gets two things, Torrential Gearhulk and the Surge for Escanta.
Can have a lot of utility here. We'll have a look at Kelvin Chew's sideboard directly as well. It's very clear that Jensen came prepared for the control matchup here. Let's move over and have a look at what Kelvin Chew will be working with in post-board games. A lot of technology available to him. Paul, what are you liking here, mate?
So what I like here is the Bantu's Last Reckoning. As you saw in that previous game, sometimes your hand doesn't curve out perfectly. Sometimes you don't have the Essence Scatter into the Disallow. And when that Bristling Hydra sneaks through, you need an answer. And Bantu's Last Reckoning is one of the cleanest answers if the board just gets a little bit too messy. Then he has a copy of Gonti, Lord of Luxury. It's got Death Touch, which does allow you to also trade with the Bristling Hydra. I can also see him bringing in some copies of Duress, given that he expects Huey to bring in some number of negates and also that Chandra in his sideboard.
So plenty of options here for the Singaporean to bolster his deck, but I have to say, Paul, I think it's a fair observation to make. The fortunes now favouring Huey Jensen. He picked up a pre-board game. That's putting him in a great position because Teema is in a good spot to tussle very hard with control decks post-board.
Right, but keep in mind, I think being on the play is a huge advantage in this matchup, and now we are tied 1-1, but Kelvin Chew is on the play in the sideboard games, and I do think whoever's on the play has a slight edge. So it is very close.
Turning on those early Essence Scatters, making sure the Fatal Pushes,
right.
in addition to something like a Tap Land, are going to be live here. So Kelvin Chew does have the tools that he needs, but we may see William Huey Jensen run away with this game. I want to point out the fact that the Teema Energy deck, its game plan, the thrust of its game plan, Paul, doesn't change. Previously, it dominates the battlefield with efficient creatures, efficient threats, and interaction in the form of removal. Post-board, against blue-black control, that interaction moves away from removal and instead contests the stack. And that is so critical when you've got a blue-black control deck that is looking to lock up the game with counterspells.
Right, the thing is, you still have your efficient creatures and your efficient threats, but now you've replaced these Magma Sprays, these Abrades, and possibly even some number of those Glory Bringers into just hard counters, so it allows you to win the counter war and actually help resolve one of those very important threats, cards like the Bristling Hydra and the Chandra that we saw on his board.
It's really interesting to see just how far Jensen has taken this Teema list towards being a control deck, because we've got 2 copies of Torrential Gearhulk.
I mean, that's the big thing, yeah, for
sure. It's huge, man. It turns into a Teema control deck, really. They're looking to grind pretty hard here, gain the card advantage wherever they can, and they can really go toe-to-toe. I think the key point is the threat's backed up with counter magic. You know, if you're slapping down a Bristling Hydra and you've got a negate to back it up, that's going to put you a long way ahead.
Yeah. My only concern is that Kelvin Chew does have a lot of ways to interact in the early game, a lot of counter magic. So if you can just manage to get some of those threats off the board, Kelvin does have more card draw, just raw card draw in his deck. He does have access to the Glimmer of Geniuses, along with a card like Search for Escanta. That just gives you inevitability. If that card ever flips and Kelvin is just doing okay, it is very difficult for him to lose. Also, keep in mind, Kelvin Chew in round 13 defeated William Jensen on Teamer.
This is the grudge match.
In round 14, he beat Reed Duke on Teamer, I believe.
So Kelvin Chew is running hot, and he was the one who ended the streak.
Oh no, that wasn't it. I think he might have played. No, he might have lost to Javier Dominguez. I take that back.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm sure it'll be straightened out one way or the other. But Kelvin Chew certainly made an incredible run throughout the weekend here in Boston. Of course, Huey Jensen, the headline after having been undefeated for much of the tournament, and of course, this guy's here to get it done in a major way, and certainly the opponent standing in his way will they'll have to dig deep and work very hard to get there, of course, because this man is a powerhouse of modern Magic. He's been around for a long time. He's been contesting Pro Tours since 1998.
Yeah, he's been around for a while. And the crazy thing about it, a lot of those pros who played back in the day, they've kind of faded away. They have not. There's only a handful of those pros that have kind of been able to stick around and still maintain their level of excellence. We have William Jensen, John Finkel, and not too much more past that. So yeah, William Jensen still just, you know, he took a huge hiatus, came back, decided, you know what?
7 years off.
I want to play competitively again. Let's see if I still got it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
he got that itch. He got that itch. And he's back at the top of the tables. Yeah, he did take a bit of a break, 2005 to 2012. He took some time off and then came back to Pro Tour Return to Ravnica, snagged himself a Hall of Fame appearance, as you do, no worries. Reconnected with a bunch of old friends, and of course, we're all very happy to have him back at the top tables of the competition, the game we all love, represented very well by this excellent ambassador for the game, I have to say, William Jensen, an unimpeachable reputation, both on and off the battlefield.
Yeah. Looks like William Jensen is going to 6, and he is on the draw, so.
It's an unfortunate position here for him, but that looks like a pretty solid keep.
Yeah, just looks like a pretty classic control hand with a random bristling Hydra standing around there.
And on the other side of the battlefield, however, geez, this is looking very hot indeed.
That is a nice hand.
Yep.
Whenever you're playing a control deck, all you want to make sure is you don't miss your land drops for the first 6 turns of the game. So this is nice. He's got that early interaction in the Essence Scatter, although I thought it might have been a Sensor, but it could also be an Essence Scatter. And he's got the Glimmer of Genius, so he's got the answer for that potential turn to Longtusk Cub. He's got to be pretty happy that he doesn't see a threat there either.
Now, Jensen does have the counter magic to back up his threats, but the question here will be how far Kelvin Chew can get ahead on mana, how far he can get ahead on cards. He's also got this like sort of Scarab God turbo mode if he senses that Jensen's on the back foot. Longtusk Cub comes down, unanswered by Kelvin Chew. It looks like Sensor is a little bit embarrassing in the face of that one open mana here.
Yeah, did he actually have that Longtusk Cub on turn 2?
I think it was a fresh draw.
Ah, I see. No, he's just a genius. He just knew. He just knew Sensor was there.
He had the soul read on Kelvin Chew.
Yeah. So this is interesting. Will Kelvin Chew opt to cycle? My guess is he probably won't. He wants to make sure he has an answer to a Bristling Hydra if Huey does opt to go for that line. And if Huey just opts to pass and to play nothing, then he can just respond by playing a Glimmer of Genius end of turn.
And this is a good spot for Kelvin Chew. He's not under a huge amount of pressure from this Longtusk Cub early on. It didn't come down on turn 2. It isn't hitting very hard. There's been no attuning with Ether, nothing like that. But all the same here, Chew has to deal with it at some stage.
Right, at some point, but there's not a ton of pressure. And I do not think Huey is going to go for the Bristling Hydra here. And yeah,
just a negate on the Glimmer of Genius. Not the traditional way you'd see it deployed, but a good way to make sure Kelvin Chew doesn't draw too far ahead here.
Yeah, and Kelvin does need to find an answer to that Longtusk Cub eventually, but if William Jensen's game plan is to counter all of these Glimmer of Geniuses, he just might not get there.
So Jensen now with the Whirl of Virtuoso off the top. He's got a Supreme Will in hand in addition to that Hydra you mentioned there, Paul.
Yeah, so this is interesting. I think William Jensen might look to just wait another turn. He could opt to just play out the Whirl of Virtuoso, but he could be mindful of an Essence Scatter. And Kelvin Chew does have access to 4 mana. He might go for another Glimmer. But it looks like he's actually just going to go with the Whirl of Virtuoso here.
Virtuoso gets down, and Chew, as we can see there, without a way to respond, although we do have a Sensor. Maybe is that going to draw him into an Essence Scatter?
Yeah,
One time.
He's looking for.
Looks like it was a Scarab God instead here. Second copy in his hand, yes indeed, as we see the Longtusk Cub get busy once again.
Wait, 1 second, I'm saying. Sorry.
And Jensen thinking about maybe he wants to put a second counter on this Cub.
Yeah,
getting very aggressive here.
You want to try to close out the game. William Jensen does have access to that Supreme Will for a counter effect, but Kelvin Chew is now going to be able to resolve this Glimmer of Genius, as William Jensen only has access to 2 mana right now.
So that's
no, he's got another negate here.
Negate.
Wow.
Okay, so this is really hamstringing Kelvin Chew here. I mean, Chew is looking to grind into the late game like Rodney Mullen here, but instead William Jensen is turning the screws very hard. And I mean, this hasn't been that ferocious 1, 2, 3, 4 curve out that the Teamer Energy deck is capable of, but it's still getting the job done here.
Yeah, but resolving those Glimmer of Geniuses is huge. It's very, very important.
And the main phase now. Main phase.
Yeah,
Glimmer
he's like,
Genius,
look, I am sick of this, man. I want to draw some cards. Please let me draw some cards.
All right, we're going to check in with Tim Willoughby, our sideline reporter here, because he's got all the info about how sideboarding panned out between these two here.
Thanks, Riley. I've taken a big step away from the feature match area, and I can tell you that Kelvin Chew, relatively small changes, 2 Essence Extraction out, 1 Sensor, 1 Supreme Will. He's brought in 3 copies of Duress and 1 Bontu's Last Reckoning. On the other side of things, William Huey Jensen, all 4 Harness Lightning out, along with 2 Magra Spray, 1 Abrade and an Essence Scatter. He's got the full package of counter magic though, 4 Negate, 1 Supreme Will. On top of that, 1 Chandra Taunts of Defiance, 1 Glimmer of Genius, 1 Torrential Gearhulk. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Tim. That's sonorous baritone massaging our eardrums. Thanks so much for the update, Tim. And the technology brought in to bear by William Jensen. Interesting that he only brought the 1 Gearhulk in there.
Yeah, just the 1 Gearhulk, and he also did not opt to bring in the Appetite for the Unnatural either.
Well, perhaps at odds there with his teammate Owen Turtenwald, because we saw him destroy an opponent.
And
with
now you see this, the 1 of Supreme Will going to be so relevant here.
Yeah.
It will actually be able to counter the Gearhulk. Kelvin Chew is aware of the fact that William Jensen has access to the 4 negates, so that's what he's probably trying to play around here. But this Supreme Will get him.
Big attacks here from Jensen. Chew
don't
more
think
or
he has
less
a choice.
priced into it here. He's going to slap this down, but Supreme Will takes care of the Torrential Gear Hulk. No way, no how, and that's going to do it for Kelvin Chew in this game here. William Jensen, I tell you what a monster of a man, able to close that out in very, very convincing fashion. And all of a sudden, Paul, he's right out ahead.
Yeah. Taking a look at William Jensen's hand early on, he didn't really have any threats.
No, the mulligan to 6.
Right, he mulliganed to 6. He had some counter magic, but some timely negates and that Longtusk Cub on turn 3 allowed him to actually pull away with the game. Kelvin Chew actually just did not have access to removal to deal with that Cub. It is very, very important to make sure you have those fatal pushes, but he was unable to find them early.
I mean, let's talk about Longtusk Cub here. It is one of the key players in the Teamer deck. If we can maybe get into it a little bit further here and talk about what role this plays in Standard. I mean, this guy has really run the tables.
Yeah, the thing is, a turn 2 Longtusk Cub, it's one of those cards, sure, yeah, if you have a removal spell, yeah, okay, it's gone, it's donezo. But if you don't, it will take over the game. Yeah. This thing can just eat up energy, it generates energy, it just does everything for the deck.
It does so much work to put pressure on decks that you know, that don't have the answers early on. And this is it's the fun police essentially of the format. It goes hand in hand with Ramunap Red in making sure that decks don't cheat on early interaction. You have to come prepared to beat a turn 2 Longtusk Cub, otherwise it will run away with the game.
There's a reason why this is one of the main reasons why these blue-black control decks play 4 copies of Fatal Push. Yeah. You need to have an answer to that Longtusk Cub.
That's right.
That is the most efficient way to deal with it.
As biologically improbable as this animal is, it does a hell of a lot of heavy lifting for the Teamer deck, and it enables this deck to you know, really exploit that flexibility. Teamer energy, it goes long. It goes long. Maybe not against a deck like blue-black control so powerfully, but on the back of Glorybringers, Bristling Hydras, this deck can go into the late game. But Longtusk Cub, on the back of especially attuned with Ether, it enables some busted, some lightning quick starts.
Yeah. That is, turn 1 attune with Ether into the turn 2 Longtusk Cub means you have a turn 2 3/3 that just gets bigger and bigger as the game goes on. This deck just has so many efficient ways to generate energy, and it can just completely take over games.
So here now, players shuffling up for our next game between these two. Kelvin Chew on the ropes a little bit here. The Singaporean at 31 years of age is going to have to battle hard to get himself back into it. He's, I mean, he's certainly making a name for himself. It's been great to see the Asia-Pacific region represented by this fellow, of course, and he's been putting in the hours, Paul. 8 to 10 hours for about 3 weeks a day. This guy's not been mucking around.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't come as too much of a surprise. People, again, the people that he tests with say, yeah, Kelvin Chew might be one of the best players you've never heard of.
Yeah.
Well, now you've heard of him.
Now you've heard of him, so he's going to take that mantle right off him. But as you mentioned, his nickname, the Master. He works at a game store in Singapore called Game Haven. And I tell you what, he's going to come back, win, lose or draw, he's going to come back to a hero's welcome after doing very, very well indeed at this tournament here. Of course, playing against the very, very best in the world. You can see many of them seated there in the viewing area. Of course, the players, 24 players converging on Boston to tussle it out for the title of world champion. Only 4 standing, 2 of which are on your screen right now. Kelvin Chew on the left, William Jensen on the right. Looks like we're settled and ready to go for our next game. As soon as everything's in readiness, we will kick things off between these two. I mean, this could be it here, Paul.
Yeah. William Jensen breaking serve there, picking up that win despite being on the draw, and I believe also a mulligan.
It's not what you want to see here, as Jensen's off to a good start with an attune with Ether. Going to smooth out those early lands here.
Yeah, when you just first read this card, you're just like, oh, it's not really that big of a deal, right? I mean, it just gets you a land. It costs 1 mana. I guess you can cheat on mana, but that energy goes so far.
I mean, we've discussed this throughout the weekend, Paul. The fact that it beefs up your harness lightnings, the fact that it puts counters on your creatures. I mean, the energy mechanic has really proven its worth in constructed.
Although taking a look at William Jensen's hand, it is a bit light on threats. Oh, but there's a Whirler Virtuoso off the top.
This could change things here, but an early Chandra. I mean, are you jamming the Chandra into open mana here on turn 3?
It's pretty hard, but he did have a Whirler Virtuoso, so I would have guessed that he probably plays that out to play around the sensor and also, you know, kind of protect the Chandra, wait to deploy that at a later point in the game.
Well, Whirler Virtuoso is going to come down on turn 3 right on time after that serve of the Conduit is dealt with by the Fatal Push.
So Kelvin Chew has that Essence Scatter, but I think he has the fear of a Bristling Hydra, but he's just like, you know what, I can't let this resolve. That Attune has already given him some energy. That Whirler Virtuoso will have the capability of producing 2 tokens. Taking a look at Kelvin Chew's hand, wow, chock full of removal. He is really, really hoping that William Jensen doesn't have a Bristling Hydra. In fact, he would actually prefer that William Jensen plays Chandra here because he can actually get that off the board.
And Jensen's played right into it here. Of course, he doesn't know, he doesn't have the privileged position of knowing all the cards in his opponent's hand here. Right. But Chandra has come down and is immediately going to eat up that Vraska's Contempt. So no harm, no foul. Off she goes.
Yeah, they get to break even on life.
We do have a bit of an update from the sideboarding point of things. I've been told that Kelvin Chew has taken out a Supreme Will and he's brought in a Duress here. So minor change there. Jensen.
Wow, this is big. I was actually going to say there's no way William Jensen is going to get censored, so I was considering maybe cycling that censor. But, okay, never mind. He actually had an Ether Meltdown, so he's opting to go for that instead.
Nice clean answer here to the Glory Bringer, although we did see the Glory Bringer's trigger be very, very crucial in an earlier game after it cleaned up a Scarab God in addition to that Magma Spray. So the 0-4 Flying Haste Dragon could still have an impact on the game. Jensen sitting on an Essence Scatter. Kelvin Chew is going to cycle away this sensor, look for some more action here.
Yeah, so that was interesting. The reason why I was thinking about considering cycling the sensor there is if you find, if you draw into a search for Azcanta, you can just play it right away. And now his hand is...
Triple Fatal Push here for Kelvin Chew.
All right, I guess he's just hoping for William Jensen to play out a ton of Longtusk Cubs. That's what he wants here.
Okay, so now here we have Whirler Virtuoso, which doesn't die on the face of it, doesn't die, but we're going to see some tech. We're going to see some tech here. This is going to be Field of Ruin.
We got the energy trigger on the stack.
Yep.
Kelvin Chew is going to opt to use Field of Ruin to give himself the ability to revolt, then use the Fatal Push to get that Whirler Virtuoso off the board. And he's doing it in response to the energy trigger so that William Jensen can only make 1 Thopter off of this Whirler Virtuoso.
This is tight stuff here from Kelvin Chew. Won't be the first time he's made this play. This is some of the reasons, one of the reasons we see cards like, I mean, there's a Singleton Evolving Wilds, just as the, the Mize Revolt Enabler there.
Yeah, it does a little bit of both. You need it for the mana fixing. Field of Ruin is also a great card against opposing search for Azcantas.
So important.
It gives you an answer for Azcanta the Sunken Ruin.
We're going to see this card a lot more moving forward, so make sure you pick up your copies of Field of Ruin, because you're going to need it to tussle with the blue-black control decks. Search for Azcanta, it could be format defining moving forward, Paul.
So at this point, Kelvin has access to some removal spells, but he really needs to find a card either like Glimmer of Genius, Scarab God. He has a lot of powerful cards he can draw, but currently, he's just sitting on a bunch of lands and removal spells. So
just the old Lando Calrissian off the top here for him, and he's going to need to head down to the petrol station, fill up the tank with gasoline, because right now, well, he's on a 20-turn clock.
Yeah, well, that might get shortened as William Jensen looks like he drew Whirler Virtuoso.
This time, Fatal Push is not going to be able to deal with it here.
Yeah, no additional way to revolt. And that's
another land. The top of Kelvin Chew's deck is not treating him kindly here. He is flooding out a little bit, and those cards in hand aren't doing a lot to interact with Huey's game plan here. You can see double Fatal Push over a Singleton Swamp.
I think William Jensen's, just
going to go wide here.
All the tokens here. And Kelvin Chew does have access to some of those Fatal Pushes. He might opt to just at least use one to kind of lower the clock, because currently this is a 3-turn clock. That's 5 damage. Now it's a 4-turn clock, as Kelvin is at 18, and he's taking chunks of 4 damage here.
Not what you want to do, trade away to Fatal Push against a little Thopterino there, but you got to do what you got to do.
Kelvin Chew really needs Glimmer of Genius or Search for Azcanta.
And I think he's found a Search for Azcanta.
Have we found it?
Top.
Have we found it?
Here we go. Search for Azcanta off the top. No response from William Jensen. This game now poised to move further on off the back of the search, which of course is flipping.
Yeah, it is going
straight
to
up
next turn. And William Jensen did not board in any of those Appetite for the Unnaturals. So it looks like we have 7 cards in the graveyard here.
Exactly 7. Threshold achieved here.
Does Kelvin Chew... Will Kelvin Chew opt to use the Fatal Push on a Thopter here?
Yeah.
All right.
I like this. I think he's really got to go shields up. He knows he's going to recoup that lost card advantage with the search for Azcanta once we find the Sunken Ruin.
Oh, but he's punished. There's a Longtusk Cub.
Oh, no! Oh, William Jensen with the perfect follow-up play to that Fatal Push. I mean, you can't fault Kelvin Chew for doing that, but all the same, Jensen with the perfect roundhouse after Kelvin's been ducking and dodging here.
And he opts to put Disallow into his graveyard.
Okay.
And he's just looking for removal effects. He's looking for Torrential Gearhulks and Vraska's Contempts.
I think it was a land off the top here. Didn't get a great look at the card that Chew drew here, but as Canter the Sunken Ruin, this can be a decisive card for the blue-black control lists who are looking to go late, looking to recoup card advantage. It really is a win condition, Paul. It doesn't look like one, but it is.
Yeah, William Jensen drawing a ton of lands here, but he still has, you know, Kelvin Chew on a 2-turn clock. Kelvin Chew still needs to find the answers off Canter the Sunken Ruin here.
Jensen working on those temples as usual, giving him a good old massage as he gets the brain zone fired up here.
All right, Kelvin Chew opting to start out with a cycle here in case he finds maybe a Torrential Gearhulk.
Okay, we're going to follow that up, I imagine, with a voyage to the sunken ruins here. Because this attack is putting him under a lot of pressure. No, going to take it. All right.
Wow. Opted not to search.
Oh, I see. In response to this trigger here.
Ah,
okay.
I see.
All right. 4 cards off the top. Glimmer of Genius amongst them. That's one way for him to start finding cards.
There is the Glimmer. So Kelvin Chew, currently, he's going to go down to 5 life, but he's going to cast a Glimmer of Genius here. So he's got a lot of great cards he can draw. Keep in mind, he did board out those Essence Extractions, so he doesn't have as many ways to recoup the life loss.
Well, Torrential Gearhulk's still going to be a great way for him to stabilize, maybe flashback something like a Fatal Push on the Longtusk Cub or what have you.
He bottoms the Glimmer too.
2 cards below decks. This is shaky territory for Kelvin Chew here.
But William Jensen does have the Essence Scatter for the Torrential Gearhulk
lands as well.
So Kelvin Chew really needs to find removal spells.
Okay, he's got a Disallow and he's got a Duress as well. But apart from that, it's just some Fatal Pushes here. Duress, latest edition, and Essence Scatter will clear the way.
So now he's got a couple of fetid pools. He can also utilize Canter the Sunken Ruin to try to find a Vraska's Contempt here to try to get that Longtusk Cub off the board, go to 7.
Huey Jensen here in a great spot. Chew, he's going to go digging. This could be it.
He needs to find a Vraska's Contempt here.
3, 4 cards off the top now. Censor is the pick.
Do it yet, but he can still cycle this.
Still got a couple of cyclers in hand here, Paul.
He needs specifically Vraska's Contempt.
Yep.
Censor, cycle. It's
That's
Torrential Gearhulk.
He's 1 mana short. He's 1 mana short.
He's got 1 more cycler left. He's got 1 cycle
left.
I think Huey might have
this.
Fetid pulls an extension of the hand as William Jensen takes out the first semi-final. His father is over the moon, as you'd imagine. His supporters around the world, they can't believe that Huey Jensen has utterly dominated this tournament so far. Smiles all around as the hometown hero takes it out against Kelvin Chew. And commiserations to the Singaporean. No shame, Paul Cheon, in going down to a titan of modern Magic as we welcome you back to the booth. Riley Knight alongside Paul Cheon. And Paul, we're all very happy we're going to get to see more Huey in the final.
Definitely. Really excited to see him make it to this next round. I mean, he played his cards, and Longtusk Cub did so much work over the course of the match.
Longtusk Cub MVP. That's it. Stick around, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to go to a break, but on the other side of this, of course, the other semi-final. And after that, we'll be concluding coverage of the top 4 here at the Magic the Gathering World Championship.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the news desk. Rich, Maria and Paul here with you. Paul, you had the ringside seat, you had the call with Riley Knight in the booth. 4 games, that kind of wasn't unexpected, but Jensen winning, that kind of was.
Yeah, well, Jensen has won a lot of matches over the course of this weekend, but actually going into this matchup, I actually thought the blue-black control deck was favored, but we did get to see just the overall raw power of this energy deck. You know, Huey was playing out his spells, running out of getting a bunch of energy, and was still just able to utilize all that energy for various top-decked creatures.
So, incredibly, 3-1, William Jensen defeats Kelvin Chew. Just in terms of matchups, William Jensen advances to the semi-final, and he has only lost twice in this entire weekend. One of those was to Kelvin Chew in standard. So that was a rerun. When he was already in the top 4, didn't matter that he lost. When he was in the top 4, 3-1, Jensen advances. So fantastic stuff. And he is now just 1 match away from being champion of the world in his home city with mum and dad watching from the rail. Pretty extraordinary stuff. Directly across the street from the building his grandfather owned. You know, it does not get more personal than that. While we're watching the cards, there's some real human stuff going on behind the scenes, under the water, as it were. So that's William Jensen through. It's time to turn our attention to the second semi-final, although we will try and track down William Jensen for you to talk to Brian David Marshall in a little bit. But we know that he is just 1 win away. It's Javier Dominguez or Josh Utter-Leyton coming his way. I wonder who he'd rather face. Perhaps BDM can find out.
Thanks, Rich. I'm here with William Huey Jensen, the Hall of Famer, and 1 step closer to the big prize, which is, of course, me bringing peach ginger oatmeal cookies to U.S. Nationals.
Yeah.
And $100,000.
Yeah, that's good, too. I don't know what to say, really. I want to play. I'm going to have to wait an hour for these guys. But, yeah, I mean, I hope I win.
You talked about being antsy before the tournament, like, I want to get to play.
Yeah.
What is this, like, 60 to 90 minutes gonna be like for you?
These are the worst times for me. Once I'm at the table, I'm fine. But, like, just waiting and waiting, the anxiety of it is, I find that to be the stressful part of playing professional Magic.
How while you were at the table, that place where you feel most comfortable, how were you? What was your mindset as you took that second game pre-sideboarded? Did that feel like that was the key there for you?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like if I could win one of the pre-sideboard games, I'd be in good shape. So after losing the first one, obviously I only have 1 left, so it was good to win that one.
Now, any preferences in terms of what deck you face in the finals? We got a couple guys behind us waiting for the honor of fighting against you in the finals. Any preferences either way?
No, they're both great players, great guys. Whoever wins, may the best man win, you know.
All right. Well, good luck, William Huey Jensen, and everybody else left here at the World Championships. Sending it back to you, Rich.
Thank you so much, BDM. Well, from Huey Jensen and Kelvin Chew to Javier Dominguez and Josh Utter-Leyton. So Josh Utter-Leyton, we're going to take a look at this player first. His mom actually surprised him and flew in to see him this morning on a red-eye flight from the Bay Area. So he's got supporters here in the building as well. There you can see him, 31 years old, 5 Pro Tour top 8s, 9 Grand Prix top 8s, the 2016 Magic Online champion. I interviewed him at that tournament. He said, I'm happy to win, but I want to go play at Worlds. Let's take a look at his deck. Blue-black control. All right, Paul, what do you make of it?
So blue-black control, very, very streamlined deck, and Josh Utter-Leyton is all in on this search for Escanta. He's got 3 copies of it in main deck, 1 in the sideboard. He identified this being one of the most powerful cards to play in a control shell. One of the most important cards in this matchup, though, we're going to have Fatal Push, Essence Extraction, and Vraska's Contempt. All of his removal spells go figure against the Ramunap red deck. The Fatal Push, great cheap interaction. Essence Extraction, a nice way to recoup the life loss. And Vraska's Contempt, a nice clean answer to Chandra Torch of Defiance.
I want to know if Search for Escanta is just too slow to play versus Mono Red.
I mean, it's possible that he opts to board maybe 1 copy out, but it is a very, very important card for his deck. At the same time, when you're playing against a mono red deck, you don't need to be as ahead on cards, so he might opt for just more cheap interaction and board some number of that card out.
Paul, we were talking earlier today to Luis Scott Vargas about the idea of the classic way to beat control is to go under it, and that William Jensen couldn't necessarily do that because Teamer is too mid-range. But this is precisely that Magic Strategy 101 of if you have counterspells at 2 and 3 on the draw, then on the other side you want to go, here's a 1, here's a 2, here's a 3, what you do in Essence Scatter. And it turns out that that is what Javier Dominguez is set up to do. Why don't we take a look at Javier Dominguez? That's Josh Utter-Leighton's opponent here in our second semi-final. The 30-year-old from Spain with it now over 200 lifetime pro points. That is the all-time pro points lead for Spain over Joel Calafell now. He has 2 9th place Pro Tour finishes. Well, this isn't a Pro Tour top 8, but a World's top 4 is truly, truly special. And now he is 2 matches away from the title. Let's see if he can get the job done with this Ramanat red list. 1 Chandra Torch of Defiance, and then creatures aplenty. 1 drop, 2, 2, 3, and eventually Hazaret the Fervent at 4. But then again, 12 1 and 2 drop spells at instant. Paul, this is as streamlined as a deck gets.
Yeah, this is a deck that kind of rose to prominence at the last Pro Tour, and honestly, it really hasn't lost a whole lot. It did lose Falconwrath Gorger as the 1-mana creature of choice. It's a 2-power 1-mana card, but it got a huge upgrade in Lightning Strike over Incendiary Flow.
I want to know how this deck comes back if it happens to fall behind to something like a blue-black control deck.
Well, I mean, I think they are a favorite in the first game. I mean, the deck does have a lot of ways to kind of finish the game. Oftentimes, aggro decks, if you flood out, that's it. Game is over. But you have access to Sunscorched Deserts, Ramunap Ruins, and if you ever resolve a Hazaret the Fervent, that's also a steady source of damage for the deck.
Is Javier a heavy favorite? Because even once Josh gets as far as sideboarding, if he is 2-0 down, Red, as we've seen on many occasions, including Paolo winning the entire Pro Tour just a few weeks ago, Ramanat Red can just kill you from essentially nowhere. And if you are 2-0 down, well, there's no more room for that to occur. So do you see it as a heavy favorite for Dominguez here?
I think Dominguez is definitely a favorite, and it's weird. Normally, when you play a control deck against an aggressive deck, you think, okay, well, you know, the control deck's going to have a lot of nice sideboard options for the matchup. But actually, when I was watching the post-board games, I actually kind of favored the red deck even more. The sideboard options that I saw that was coming out of Josh Utter-Leighton were cards like Contraband Kingpin, which traditionally seems like a nice sideboard card, right? It's a 2-mana, 1/4 lifelinker, blocks everything. But Javier Dominguez just went Stun Creature, Chandra, Glorybringer. And that 1/4 creature just looked kind of impressive. It looked like it didn't do a whole lot. He was just able to go over the top of that 2-drop.
Well, our players are ready, so let's head down to the feature match area for our second semifinal here at the World Championship.